Alright, it's Henry again, and today I'm going to be doing a tutorial on how to build a resin kit, because I know there's a lot of modelers out there that have only built plastic model kits and may be thinking about getting into resin. Well, this video will just go over the basics of building a resin kit, just the prep work, how it's different than a plastic kit, and how you go about building and painting one. So, the example I'm going to be using for the most part through this tutorial is the G-System 172 scale Nero, which is a full resin kit. There are also conversion kits out there which contain resin parts that you can attach to a plastic model kit, usually a master grade. And you know, resin kits can vary dramatically in terms of size, price, and quality. Also, you are going to run into the issue of original kits versus recasts. Now, since most resin, well, actually, at this point, all resin Gundam kits are third party, since Bandai doesn't have B Club anymore, so Bandai doesn't make resin kits anymore. So the copyright infringement area is sort of gray here. This G-System kit is an original, so usually with an original resin cast kit from G-System or Neo Grade or B Club or CoreWorks or something like that, it's going to be really, really nice quality. Generally, recasts are not quite as good a quality. You can get really, really good recasts like SMS. E2046 is kind of hit or miss. The last several years, their quality has really gone up. This Mercurius, for example, is really good casting quality. But E2046 has also made some really bad resin recasts. So it's sort of hit or miss. If you have a kit that you're interested in and you're not really sure, just go out into the community and ask somebody who may have had experience with that particular kit, and they'll be able to give you some answers. So anyway, first step you're going to want to do when you get a resin kit is do a parts check. Unlike a plastic model kit, resin kits aren't cranked out by a giant machine in a factory. They're made by hand. People scratch build the model kits, and then they make a mold out of silicone rubber, and then they cast the parts with polyurethane resin to make copies, and then they do that over and over and over and over again until they make enough of them to sell. And generally they make their own boxes and packaging, and that's why they have the nickname garage kits, because a lot of times it's just a group of guys in a garage making these resin kits. So they're quite a bit different than a plastic kit in terms of the way they're created. The building process is not quite as different as you would think. A lot of the same modeling techniques apply to a resin kit as they would to a plastic kit, but there are some differences. But anyway, first off, like I said, you're going to want to do a parts check, because since these are made by people and people can make mistakes, you always want to check and make sure all the parts are in the box. I have gotten, you know, I think maybe 2 or 3 resin kits that were missing parts. Some companies like G-System are really, really good about providing replacement parts. Some places might not be so good at providing replacements. Some resin companies might not even be in existence anymore, like B Club or CoreWorks, and I'm pretty sure Neo Grade doesn't exist anymore. So, and most of the time when you get a resin kit, they are going to give you a parts layout similar to what you would see in a Bandai plastic model kit manual. This is literally just a photocopy of all of the parts that are in the kit. And then when you get it, most resin kits are molded in this tan colored resin. The G-System Nero that I'm going to be working on is molded in colored resin, so you've got all these different colored parts. And of course you also have the parts checklist. So go through and make sure that you have all the parts that you're supposed to have. And if you don't, try to contact the original company like G-System, or if that doesn't work, you can contact the store that you bought the kit from. Maybe they sell replacements. If not, you might have to try your hand at scratch building or recasting. Okay, so after you've gone through the entire kit and checked all the parts and made sure you've got everything, next is the cleanup process. Now, some people like to wash the parts first, right off the bat. Personally, I like to clean up the gates and the nubs and all that stuff first, and then wash the kit. So I'll be washing it after I do all this. So on a plastic kit, you'll have a part like this, and it'll after you cut it off the runner, it'll generally have 2, 3, or 4 nub marks that you have to clean up. Most of the time on resin kits, you're only going to have like 1, and it's going to look quite a bit different. This whole piece of plastic right here at the top is your nub mark. So what we're going to have to do is cut off right there, and then all that is just going to be discarded. I've got my nippers here. I'm just going to carefully, because I don't want to cut off any of the actual part. I just want to cut off the excess resin. You'll get rid of that. Sometimes, depending on the manufacturer and the parts that are being made, you'll have more than one area to do cleanup, but for larger parts and simpler parts, most of the time you're just going to have one. And then it's just a matter of sanding it down. You can use a file, or you can use sandpaper, whichever one you're more comfortable with. I've got this little sanding block here that works pretty well for me. And you'll want to go over the part, because of the way resin kits are made, there's going to be a bit more excess that you have to clean up. It used to be this way with plastic kits way back in the day. This is what we call flash. It's just really thin bits of excess plastic along the edges of the part. And depending on the quality of the kit, the better quality the resin casting job is, the less flash it's going to have. Just like plastic model kits nowadays are usually made with really high quality, so flash is something that doesn't even really exist anymore on a modern plastic model kit. But with the resin kits, it's still around. And then generally, I mean, if you want to, you could leave it at this and just wash this and go ahead and paint it, or you can sand it up. I like to just go over everything with a light sanding, just to make sure all the edges are nice and sharp and crisp, and all of the surfaces are nice and perpendicular. And I've got all kind of varieties of different sandpaper here that I'll go in and smooth everything out. And occasionally you'll get like a little lump or a divot or something that you'll need to either sand down or fill in with putty, but the basic idea is that they're not going to be as perfect as the parts you would get out of a plastic kit. So you'll just need to do a little bit more cleanup. It's a little bit more effort than a plastic kit, but generally the outcome is a whole lot nicer. Also, if you feel so inclined, this would be a good opportunity to rescribe the panel lines. Now, on resin kits, panel lines can be sort of hit or miss, and really it's the same way on a plastic kit. Sometimes they'll be molded nice and sharp and deep, and you won't have to do any rescribing. Sometimes the panel lines will be kind of shallow, and you might want to rescribe them so that they'll be a lot easier to ink in when you get around to that process. So I've got a couple scribers here. This is a MadWorks scribing chisel. This is a 0.15 millimeter blade, and this is the one I use most of the time. This is what I use for panel lines 99% of the time. I also have a Tamiya scriber that's I think that's like a 0.3 millimeter blade, but I just like the feel and the way this one works a lot better. And it's really quite simple. When I'm like scribing new panel lines, obviously you want to use some sort of guide like Dymo tape or something, but when rescribing pre-existing panel lines, I usually just do it freehand because the line's already there, you're just making the line deeper. And with one of these chisels, you don't have to use a whole lot of pressure. I just do a few little passes, and that's usually sufficient to rescribe it. And then after you've got everything scribed, it's usually a good idea just to go over with some fine grit sandpaper just to make sure there aren't any raised edges or little straggly bits of sandpaper, or not sandpaper, plastic, resin, whatever, laying around. Then a toothbrush to get the dust out of the panel lines. And you're good to go. Let's see, I hope this will even show up. There we go. So these are ones I rescribed. These are the, man, come on camera. These are the original panel lines. These are ones I just rescribed, so they're a little bit deeper and will be a bit easier to ink in when I get around to the panel lining process. Alright, so after the long, tedious process of getting all of the excess resin cleaned up on these kits, the next thing you're going to want to do is wash the kit. Now, I am using a industrial cleaner called Purple Power. This is pretty popular amongst modelers for cleaning up resin kits, stripping chrome plating off of plastic parts, things like that. You don't have to use this. It's not very expensive. It was like, this is a 1 gallon jug and it only costs like $5. But if you don't have access to that, or if you just don't feel like paying for it, you can also use like dishwashing liquid, something with a good degreasing agent. So you could just mix up some soapy water with dishwashing liquid, and that would probably work perfectly fine. And it's really quite simple. I've already got some of the parts soaking here. Just put your resin parts in a little plastic container and then fill it up with your cleaning solution. Now I'm going to let these set overnight. They really don't have to set like a terribly long time. I'm recording this particular video segment about 10 o'clock at night, and I think by tomorrow morning they should be perfectly clean enough and ready to rinse off. So just going to let these set here and let the Purple Power do its thing. Alright, so the parts have bathed in Purple Power overnight, and now it's time to rinse. I've just got a container here of some clean water, and it's pretty easy. You just dip them in there, give them a little scrub with a toothbrush, and rinse them off. There we go. And usually I'll just shake off all the excess cleaner, and then just dump them in the water. And then just sort of individually pull them out. Give them a nice scrub with the toothbrush just to make sure you're getting everything. Dunk it back in, shake it off, and put it over here on the towel. I've already got some of the parts over here drying. Just let them air dry. I don't bother trying to use anything else to dry them. And what this whole process is doing, even though while you're doing the cleanup and maybe doing any test fitting or anything, the parts may not feel greasy. They may actually feel pretty dry and clean. But the way resin kits are made is they make a silicone mold and they use a non-stick substance called mold release. It's a very greasy liquid that keeps the two halves of the silicone mold from sticking together, and also helps them pull the resin parts out of the mold a little bit easier. And although it may not feel like the parts have any mold release on them, it's best to go ahead and wash them just to make sure that everything is nice and clean, because you don't want to be doing final assembly or masking or somewhere along the line of building this kit and the paint all of a sudden peels up. Paint does not stick to polyurethane resin nearly as easily as it sticks to plastic, so that's something that you really have to take extra precaution for with a resin kit, which I'll get into on the next part of this tutorial where I cover painting. But the key to having a smooth paint job with no unexpected difficulties is to make sure you do all your prep work, get the kit nice and clean, make sure you use primer and all that stuff, because you really don't want to have to start all over and completely repaint a part after you've already gone through the trouble of painting it. So this may seem like a lot of work, but better safe than sorry, as they always say. And you could do this in the kitchen sink, but if you're going to do that, you really obviously want to get some sort of grate to put over the drain, because you really don't want any of your parts going down the sink drain. That would be very, very bad. So if you're going to do it in the sink, buy some sort of protective grate to keep yourself from losing any of the parts. Okay, you're probably wondering why I'm in the kitchen. Well, one thing about resin, just due to the nature of the type of polyurethane plastic that it's made out of, occasionally you'll get a part that's a little bit warped. See how this part isn't perfectly straight? It's got a little bit of a curve to it. You can fix warped parts, luckily, and it's a lot easier to do than on a plastic kit. Of course, it doesn't happen very often on plastic kits, but it does happen every now and then on a resin kit. And the way you fix it is with boiling water. Bloop. Just drop it in there. Got a couple more parts that also need to be done. And obviously you'll want to be very, 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 very careful, because you're dealing with boiling water. And it really doesn't take very long, just a few minutes. Let the resin parts boil for a little bit, and then you can use a pair of tongs or tweezers or something and pull the parts out, and then you can gently reshape them. Alright, so I've got the part out, and as you can see, it's very, very flexible now, but it's not going to stay that way for long, so you'll want to hurry up and reshape it to the way you want it to be, because once it cools off, it's going to solidify and it's going to become hard again. and if you don't have it in the shape you need it, you'll have to put it back in the boiling water. But it's very, very easy to reshape once it's soft, and then it's just a matter of getting it where you want it and then letting it cool off. Some parts will become softer than others just depending on the resin, and I don't know if the dye has anything to do with it, since this is a colored resin kit, but yeah, this was actually very floppy when I got it out of the boiling water, and it has solidified up very, very quickly. So now it is pretty much perfectly straight, just the way it needs to be, and it's ready to go. And something that you're gonna have to do almost on every resin kit you buy is drill holes. So you're gonna want to invest in a set of drill bits and a pin vise, maybe even a power drill if you're gonna need to be drilling really big holes. That's just the way that the resin casting process is. It's sometimes really difficult for the mold to replicate a hole that goes all the way through a part. So a lot of times the maker of the kit will have like an indentation here showing what size the hole is supposed to be and where it's supposed to be, and all you have to do is match up the proper size drill bit to the hole and then just drill through yourself. It's really not hard to do. It's actually very, very easy. And a lot of times they'll even say in the instructions where to drill holes and what size drill bit to use, so that makes things very, very easy. So there you go, hole drilled, and then you can just assemble the parts together. This one's got a bolt and a screw that goes through it and connects these two parts. And what I would recommend is getting a set of metric drill bits. Now, I got these off of eBay from a seller in England, and they're all metric in increments of 0.5 millimeter. And since everything coming out of Japan and China is in metric, having a set of metric drill bits will make things much, 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 much easier. This is one of the best purchases I've ever made as far as modeling tools go. You can get by with a set of American empirical drill bits that are, you know, in 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, 1/16 inch, 32 inch, whatever. But those are, you'll be able to get close to the sizes you need, but they won't be exact. And if you're having to put like pegs into holes and drill holes for like bolts and screws and things like that, you're going to want it to be as precise as possible. So I don't think that was terribly expensive. I think that set of drill bits was like maybe 20 bucks, 25, something like that. So it's worth it in my opinion to go ahead and track down a set of metric drill bits, since that is the measurement system they use in Japan and China. Now, last but not least, as far as construction goes, is a very, very, very important skill to learn as far as resin building goes, which is pinning. Now, we got these two parts right here, and they fit together like so, but they don't really stay together. See, it just sort of drops off. Even though it's got, you know, this sort of half circle shaped peg and a half circle shaped hole, and they fit together very well. It's a very loose connection. So the way you can glue this together, but if you go ahead and glue it together now, that's going to make it very hard to paint. Plus, sometimes resin kits can get very heavy, so glue isn't always sufficient for holding up the weight of the parts that you need to connect together. So that's why we have a method called pinning. And what you'll need for pinning is a drill bit and a pin vise. And then a lot of people like to use metal rods. These are some brass rods I just bought at Hobby Lobby. They were $3, not very expensive. And you'll also need a pair of wire cutters. Something like these. These are electrical wire cutter stripper things. And what you're going to do is you're going to find a drill bit that's as close as possible to the diameter of the pin that you're going to use, in this case a brass rod. And you're going to drill a hole at the connection point. Now it doesn't have to be terribly deep, but you don't want it to be too shallow. You want it to be, you know, at least a few millimeters down in there. Now unfortunately, my metric drill bits are kind of betraying me at this point, because I have metric drill bits, but these brass rods are empirically measured, so this 1 millimeter drill bit is just barely big enough for this brass rod to fit into, but it does go in. And the way I do it is I just put it as far down in there. You can even use a little bit of super glue to make sure it's nice and secure, and then just cut off a few millimeters from the end of the pin like so. And what I like to do is you can either push it in like so, and you'll see that it'll make a mark, but sometimes that doesn't always work very well, so I like to use a Sharpie and get the end of that pin nice and inked up, and then press it in there, and then you've got a little Sharpie mark down in there, and that'll tell you where to drill on the other side. So then you just drill out on the other part, and once you get it drilled deep enough, you'll be able to connect the two parts together. There we go. And now it is a rock solid connection. Pinning is a very, very good way to do test fitting, because it'll give you a really strong connection without having to glue anything together. And with pinning, you might not even have to use glue at all, depending on the parts. Now, not all parts are going to be able to be pinned together. Some parts are just too small and too thin to be able to drill a hole and insert a metal pin. But for larger parts like these, pinning is a really, really good technique to get parts to fit together very, very securely. Now, pinning is the traditional method of assembling a resin kit together, but another method that has a very, very similar effect is using magnets. Now, these are neodymium magnets. They're the super, super strong ones that really take some effort to pull apart. And you can buy these. I actually got these particular magnets at Hobby Lobby, but you can go on websites like K&J Magnetics and get magnets in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, and they're really, really useful for modeling, especially resin kits. You can also use them on plastic kits as well. But the theory is the same as pinning, only instead of being a metal rod, it's going to be a magnet. So we got the backpack here and the torso, and it's got a big square hole and a big square peg, and they fit together just fine, but it doesn't really stay on. So what we're going to do is use a magnet to connect these together. Actually, I'm going to do a little starter hole right here in the middle so I can make sure that it's centered. And for this particular one, I'm using my power drill because this magnet is 8 millimeters wide, and I don't know of a pin vise anywhere that'll let you put an 8 millimeter drill bit in it. So we're just going to slowly and carefully drill that out. And you don't want it to be too awfully deep, just deep enough for that magnet to be able to fit down inside. And then I'm going to do, oops, hit the camera. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the backpack here. Make me a little center mark. And and drill out a hole in the backpack, and we're ready. Now you can glue these magnets in. I've already done a test fit of these magnets, so I know that it's a really tight, snug fit, so I don't think I'm going to need to use glue. So it's just a matter of pushing that down inside there. One magnet installed. And then definitely make sure that you are installing the magnets in the correct direction, because you don't want the magnets to be repelling each other rather than being attracted to each other. Let's see, I might have to just do it this way. So I'm going to push that in there. Let's see, I might need some help. Use this hobby knife. There we go. Alright. So, the moment of truth. Works like a charm. Very secure connection. It's a little bit, I mean, if obviously you shake it too hard, it'll run the risk of coming off, but, you know, it's staying pretty good, seeing as how this is a big old backpack. So, that is the magnet trick. Alright, and with a bit of elbow grease, you will have a, not snap together, but test fitted, pinned together resin kit. And at this stage, it's going to be really unstable. I'm not going to lie to you. It's not going to be as stable as a plastic kit. You're not going to be able to play with it at this point because nothing's glued together. Once you get the kit painted and get everything glued together, it's going to be a lot more stable. But right now, the kit may look good, but it's very, very fragile. So I'm not touching the kit at all during this video segment because I don't want to knock it over. It's just kind of, it can stand at this point, and that's about it. Posing is not something that I'm going to be able to do until after I get it painted and glued together. So, a couple last things I want to let you know is sometimes, even when you have holes and pegs on these resin kits, you may need to re-drill those out. Sometimes a peg might not fit perfectly in the hole, and you might have to sand the peg down or drill the hole out a little bit bigger, so be prepared to do stuff like that. Also keep in mind that resin kits are made by all kind of different manufacturers, and every resin kit is different. Some of them are fixed pose and don't have any articulation. Those are relatively easy to assemble. You just pin the whole thing together and it doesn't move. Some of them, like this one, have a really complex joint system. This one doesn't have a full inner frame. It has an inner frame on the arms and like the thighs, and that's about it. Some G-System kits do have a full inner frame, and those are going to be more and more complex, and that are going to be a lot more difficult to build. So I would not recommend a G-System for your very first resin kit. On top of them being expensive, G-System kits tend to be very, very complex and are not really good for a first-time resin building experience. But yeah, some kits are going to be a lot easier to build than others. The resin kits are not as standardized as Bandai plastic Gunpla kits, so just keep that in mind. The quality is going to depend on the manufacturer of the kit. So I think that has just about covered everything in this. This is going to be part 1 of the resin building tutorial. This has got all of your prep work done. The kit's been sanded, cleaned up, and washed, and test fitted together, and now you are ready to move on to painting, and that's going to be part 2 of the resin building tutorial, which will come hopefully pretty soon, about the time I get done painting this kit. And that's going to cover priming and painting and how you can keep your paint from peeling off or lifting off when masking with these kits. If you've gone over and done all the prep work in this video, the washing, the sanding, the cleanup, all that stuff, that's really going to go a long way with making your paint job go a lot smoother. So make sure you don't skip any of the steps, and you're going to have a very, very pleasant resin building experience. So that about does it for this video, and I will see you guys again at part 2.